So really what Nietzsche is saying to me is that fundamentally man is alone in the universe. And no matter how much we try to transcend that through our emotional attachments, through our friendships, through our romantic relationships, it's ultimately doomed to failure.
Baby.
So it's through the teleological suspension of the ethical that Kierkegaard challenges us to transcend our heuristic oneness and make the spiritual connection with the other.
No, baby.
Scene 1A, take 3.
And what the neo-Malthusians in Congress will never understand is that classical economics' conception of man as a solely self-interested actor fails to take into account his spiritual essence. And without that
No, baby.
Take 4.
And that was exactly Schopenhauer's point. Although I have to admit my enthusiasm for continental philosophy was somewhat diminished when I learned that Immanuel Kant died a virgin.
No, babe, I swear to God.
Take 5.
And so the waiter says to him, "Monsieur Descartes, would you like to see a dessert menu?" Descartes says, "I think not." And poof, he disappears. Because
I'm telling you, man.
Stop sticks, Mark.
So after I left the bank, I spent 4 years studying mysticism in an ashram north of Mumbai, to getting in touch with my Kundalini. But I always had one question. You know, if you're one of those Hindu deities, you know, with the 6 arms, where do you get a sport jacket?
Mark.
When I finally turned the last page of the I Ching, and I felt that wave of divine warmth bathe my soul. You want to go back to my place?
What do I think?
And as Gregor Samsa awoke one morning, he found himself in his bed, transformed into a giant insect. He must have been like, "Dude, what the fuck? I'm a giant beetle."
No, babe.
You know, what I really find wanting in Nietzsche's critique of Schopenhauer is that he completely ignores the neoclassical origins of Schopenhauer's thought. I mean, if you're going to critique the Apollonian implications of a tragic origins, you have to understand that the Aristotelian ethos contradicts the Platonic origins. No? Am I crazy or what? Exactly. So when I said to the guy, and what the neo-Aristotelians will never understand, never, is that it is not man's reason that raises him above the level of the beasts, but his passions. Yes, Susan, his passions. Because although animals experience instinct, only human beings experience passion. And that is... And so, Susan, when Nietzsche responds to Schopenhauer, what he says is, "Schopenhauer, Arthur, buddy, it's not man's infinitude that renders him incapable of transcending his own mortality, but rather, paradoxically, his finitude."
No, babe.
Take 13, soft sticks, Mark.
And so, well, literally, dozens of scholars have explored the Kantian influence on the 19th century transcendentalists of New England. Virtually no one, before my book, of course, has explored the Neoplatonic influence. And that's the whole key to understanding their whole approach to the politics of the late 19th century American.
No, babe.
You know, this is disgusting.
Okay. All right, action on JV.
And what the critics completely fail to understand about McLuhan's work is that he was not critiquing the media qua the media, but rather subverting the entire notion of medium itself. Because what is the Latin word for media? Something that comes between. And what McLuhan was saying was that no, there is no between. What really drives me nuts is those people who say, sure, Chomsky's a linguistic genius, but that has nothing to do with his political thought. Whereas what they're ignoring is that it's language that creates political community to begin with. And that to divorce his political thought from his linguistic achievements is to completely misunderstand the man. In other words,
No.
and so there were the sophists who'd go from village to village around ancient Greece teaching rhetoric, right? But it was Socrates who said, no, it's not about rhetoric, it's about the truth. And that was the whole revolution in philosophy that he started back then in ancient Greece. And because what he was doing. And so what I'm trying to do in my work is deconstruct this whole dichotomy between true and false, false and true. Because really, when you think about it, there's no strict opposition. It's more of a fluid line, right? And in a Lacanian way, it's like when the gaze penetrates the other, and he responds with that searching inquiry that shows that.
Nah, baby, I love your parents.